Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. In the last part, we reset our 3-day cycle after reaching Stone Tower's temple entrance, and now it's time for us to go actually do it. The quickest way to the canyon is through the east gate. Alright. Also, I don't know why. Mentally, in my brain, I know Snowhead is north, Ikana Canyon's the east, blah blah blah. But with the way I play the game in my eyes, Ikana Canyon's to the north in my memory, and I don't know why. It's like I just directionally assume that's to the north, and I think it's because, assumedly, Stone Tower is probably the tallest thing in Termina, and that's just what should be to the north to me. But now it's time for us to go start the actual dungeon. I know I said there was going to be a little bit of setup last time, but I was actually thinking ahead a little bit. The main reason I wanted to do this on a fresh cycle mostly relies around the boss fight and things I can do around the world with good timing that would just kind of streamline some things, essentially. But before we actually enter the dungeon, we have another Elegy of Emptiness puzzle. Get used to playing this song. As much as I love this game and I love its dungeons, I think the reliance on the Elegy of Emptiness to get up to this dungeon, as well as even the few times you have to use it inside of it, kinda break the pace of the dungeon a bit, even though I love this dungeon overall. It's times like this that I wish the 3DS version maybe also allowed you to, like, map a part of the touchscreen to play one or two songs without having to actually input them. In a way similar to, and this is gonna be a weird comparison, what Street Fighter 4 3D did for special moves. You could put some moves on the touchscreen, that's what the Deku statue looks like, by the way, and you could just tap the touchscreen in those places and you would do the moves without any of the inputs. Which, if memory serves, led to the online being just filled with guiles because you didn't need to worry about charging. The main reason I remember this that well, Street Fighter 4 3D was my first 3DS game. The launch, the 3DS was great. But the launch of it was kind of dire for games, and in a lot of regards, that's pretty consistent for launches of consoles. If anything, in terms of like what games were like at this launch of a system, the Switch had one of the better launches that I can remember, if only because it had Breath of the Wild, and I was about to say, not many consoles have a Zelda game at launch, but the Wii did as well in Twilight Princess. In fact, that's part of the reason why that game was delayed so long. Same with Breath of the Wild, I guess, at the end of the day. So now that the blocks can be easily jumped across, we can make our way into Stone Tower Temple proper. And I think there is a slight musical difference between Stone Tower and the temple, but it's like only a few instruments being added. I've always found the fact this particular dungeon has a little statue in the entrance that almost looks like Majora's Mask itself interesting. And that goes into a lot more of the theory crafting I brought up last time of what the origins of the tower are, what Termina's faith is, and all that in history. There's all sorts of theories about Majora's Mask itself's origins, that maybe the Stone Tower Temple was a part of that and all that. I don't really give a lot of those theories a lot of room in my head, if only because Majora's Mask is one of those things that not is more threatening because of the lack of distinct origin, but having a distinct origin wouldn't necessarily add anything. If anything, the origin I like the most, just because it's still so vague in its mysteries, is the one that the Majora's Mask manga created, honestly, where the mask was carved from the remains of armor that was on a dragon that was super powerful and hard to defeat, but someone that happened to look like Link tired it out to death by having it dance for 3 days and 3 nights. Do I think that's the actual explanation? No, but I think in terms of like creating an interesting origin myth that ties in with the themes of the game, I think that did the best of it. But that's because the Akira Himekawa manga for Zelda are just generally super good. I still need to read through the Twilight Princess one. I only have the first volume of that. So this room's a little interesting, and I think this room even got a little bit of a change-up in the 3DS release. We have 4 switches in here, that we need to play the LG of Emptiness to weigh down. But since the Deku cannot weigh down any of these switches, you actively have to use a box from behind those boxes I rolled into to weigh down one of the smaller ones. With that said, be careful, because if you destroy the boxes you need to weigh down the switch with, you need to leave the room and re-enter and restart the puzzle at that point. If anything, it could be recommended after you take care of the bomb shoes in here to just do that first, so you don't need to worry about destroying them. I think the change this room got in the 3DS version was that you had a block with Majora's mask on it you could push to weigh down the switch that couldn't be destroyed. And that's a change I think is for the better, although this room is arguably one of my least favorites in the game overall because of it. It's just so weirdly tedious on repeat playthroughs. I distinctly remember during the spring break, I've mentioned this LP before, where I played through the game like 3 times in a row. At least I think I mentioned that. By the time I got to the 3rd playthrough, I was kind of rolling my eyes when I got to this dungeon, just like, alright, come on, let's get a move on. Weighing down all of the switches opens up that door, and we can progress on. With that said, if we ever have to go through this room again, you do have to put the switches down again, which is kind of annoying. And in here, it's not immediately obvious unless I think you look in from the room below. But this particular piece of thing here, that particular darker tile, can be destroyed. If you need bombs, you have the blast mask for one thing. But I believe some of the grass over there can drop bombs. Also, you might have already noticed something about this dungeon's layout, particularly in this room, particularly involving a Deku flower you might have been able to see a second ago. We'll worry about that in a few moments. Also, I guess there's the 2 doors in front of us. More on that later. But the next room really highlights something I like about this dungeon a lot, not just with the LG of Emptiness and how it works, but in here, once we get rid of this sunblock, you might notice there's lava on the floor, and we're gonna need to get across that to open a chest. Stone Tower Temple, in general, is a really cool dungeon that it actively requires you to use all 3 transformation masks in very meaningful ways to their playstyle and unique attributes. And they build up to this temple in such a cool way in retrospect, that where Woodfall Temple is entirely Deku and Hylian links, Snowhead, barring 1 or 2 uses of Deku Link, particularly towards the end, is entirely Goron and Hylian Link's show. Great Bay Temple is more Zora Link than it is Hylian Link at that point. And then here we're going to be using all 3 in really cool ways that only they can do something. In a way, you could look at the masks more so as extensions of Link's moveset, like they are multiple items in one. And because of that, this dungeon arguably uses more of your inventory items than any other dungeon in the series. Even more so than some final dungeons. Either way, in that room, we had some Armos Knights, their only real appearance in the game. Armos Knights, you touch them, they start patrolling around and trying to hit you. You're meant to use bombs to kill them back in Ocarina, but you can just use Goron Link's punches to do the same effect. And killing them all will spawn in a key we're gonna need. There's also the map in this room, and up here, kind of craftily hidden, is a stray fairy. I've had several playthroughs where I forget that one's there until we come back to this room down the line in a different form, and at that point, it's one hell of a backtrack to get back to it. Speaking of Zora Link, here's a room we need to use them in. But this room's actually one that gave me a lot of grief when I was a kid because I just went about it the real wrong way. Because this Dexy hand here, I've killed it several times. It actively throws you up to this platform, which you need to be on if you want to easily get not only this treasure chest, which you need for progress, if memory serves. Is this a key? Yeah, you need that. But also, there's that crystal switch over there. You're meant to wait until you get the dungeon item to get to it, but you can just throw a rock over there, no problem. We're not able to get the stray fairy chest that it spawns until later, but you can get it now. But the reason this room was a nightmare to me as a kid, I didn't rely on the Dexy hand. I did very precise Zora jumps up to here, which was just a pain in the ass. I do not recommend doing that method unless you're just real diehard about the Zora form in that regard, which, hey, if you're playing the Japanese version, you've already trained yourself well enough to do that pretty consistently. This dungeon can be pretty punishing, though, in that if you miss an item early on or later on and you do a certain thing, it's probably going to be a several-minute backtrack to get it correctly. For instance, if you miss this particular floor switch, getting that chest later is not going to be possible, and that's a required chest, so that's several minutes just lost. Also, you're probably noticing there's a lot of things on the ceiling we can't really grab or interact with. You're probably starting to figure out how part of this dungeon works, but we'll talk more about that towards the end of the part. This room is also home to a frequent oopsie for me, though, in that, as you can see by the map here, there's a north and south path here. If you want to beat the dungeon, you only need to go towards that locked door, which I think is the north path. Yeah, that's the north path. But in order to get everything that's technically required for 100%, if you want to count even unique dungeon items, you do need to go to the south path. Also, the north path here is one of my least favorite rooms in the game. Because for one thing, we have to punch these things like they're the snowhead pillar pieces from all the way back there, which kind of random to bring that back now, especially considering I think you can only tell you can do that if you tattle on them. But this also introduces another light shield, mirror shield mechanic. If you reflect light into mirrors like the ones in this room, you store the light in them, and the moment you remove the mirror shield's light from them, they project that light out from them. You need to use that to charge light to go from one mirror to another, and the timing on that can also be kind of rough, especially if you're trying to reflect, say, the light into a sunblock. Like, that looked easy, but getting consistent aim with that, especially in the room that we were just in, can be rough. And this is the item I was talking about. This is the compass for this dungeon. Technically, you never need it, but you might as well anyway, especially considering how many stray fairies in this particular dungeon especially are contained in chests throughout the game. It's just one of those things that when I miss it, it's just a big, damn it moment. Because there is an opportunity for me to grab it down the line, technically. But, oh well. But yeah, in this room, the path to the right, as you can see, only leads to a chest, which does contain a stray fairy, if memory serves, so we need to do that too. But in order to progress in the dungeon, we need to bounce light between, I think, 3 different mirrors to reach this sunblock on the far north end of the room. And that can be a pain in the ass. Not just because of the mechanic itself, but because the bows in this room respawn infinitely. If they were like maybe 15 and then you're done, this room wouldn't be nearly as bad, because at that point you could just kill them all and then just really sit on charging that mirror for a while until it probably reaches whatever the max capacity for it is. That's the Nejiron. That's the thing I brought up when we were first entering Ikana Canyon for the first time for real, for us to get towards the owl statue. They're only in this room in this dungeon, I think. And yeah, they're creepy looking. Not exactly threatening, because I don't even really think they attack besides just rolling at you. And if you attack them, well, as you see, you get some explosive results. Thankfully, even though controlling the shield in this position can be a little finicky on the N64 especially, the hitbox for the mirrors absorbing light is pretty generous. So it's just a matter of getting to the right place and aiming in time, more than anything. But yeah, this room's kind of rough. But not in like the actually hard way, just in the annoying way, which is arguably worse. Now the next room, that can be annoying in the honestly hard way. But that's just because of, again, some surprisingly strict timing compared to everything else in the game. You do need to actively aim towards the sun sigil on any of those blocks for it to count, by the way. I forget if 3DS kept that as the way it was. I want to say it did. But it's been a hot minute. Because anytime I've really tried to play through Majora's Mask 3D in a while, I get to Ikana, and I just stop, because I just remember what's coming up at that point. Alright, in this room we got some lava. Pound on that switch, and the fire around the switch on the other side of the room drops, but you need to gun it to get over there. because the timing on that fire is precise. I think I maybe only had like half a second to a second left before the fire resumed again. It's rough. But you need to press it because it leads to things. On top of that, there's 2 chests in here, and we now need to do a surprisingly kind of tough Deku Flower fly. Because the Deku Flower, obviously we've covered it, how they work before. It's a radius thing. And you can extend the radius in rooms like this by using the little wind tunnels here. They basically act as flowers in their own regard. But you also need to remember to come over here to get this stray fairy, which I have forgotten several times. In fact, you may have even noticed there was a little jump cut hidden stealthily in there because I forgot the stray fairy and then immediately messed up the Deku Flower fly and fell into lava, which was a void out. Whoops. This is particularly tight. Oh god, that never feels comfortable. After this room, though, we are going to be treated to one of my favorite character designs in the game in this dungeon's first mini-boss. That's the Garo Master. You can't fight him like any ordinary Garo, just dodge those swords. The Garo Master is more or less a Garo, but he teleports all over the place to try and surprise you from above and behind. And whenever you hit him, he does his own little spin attack on the ground to try and surprise you. The best thing to wait for here is wait for him to attack, and then he looks around kind of confused for a second. At that point, he's very open for attack. Notably, though, in the 3DS version, the Garo Mask's design was changed to resemble this thing, if only because the Garos in Ikana Canyon itself kind of talk about their master being what your mask is from, and that just doesn't look anything like that. To think I could be defeated. Although, my rival, you were spectacular. I shall take my bow by opening my heart and revealing my wisdom. If you shoot that which releases the sacred golden light into the blood-stained red emblem outside the temple, it shall rearrange things in which the earth is born in the heavens, and the moon is born on the earth. Do not forget these words. Die I shall, leaving no corpse. That is the law of Asgaro. And now, you probably have noticed the trend when it comes to dungeon items so far. The dungeon item of the Stone Tower Temple is the final arrow type in the game. Light arrows. Set it to C to power up your arrows. The light of justice shall target evil. Now, if memory serves, unlike some other Zelda games, the light arrows in this game aren't stronger than fire or ice arrows. They are exactly the same strength, but they do have an added benefit, similarly to fire and ice arrows, whereas fire arrows can light things on fire, like the torches to help progression easier. Ice arrows can freeze platforms. Light arrows can trigger red switches that are mostly found in this dungeon exclusively. They can stun enemies a little more easily, and most importantly, they are the source of the best grinding method in the game. And we'll showcase that a little bit next part. It's an Igor. Simply attacking it is no good. I'd say you should pay attention to the subtle changes in its eye. I think this is the first reappearance of Igors since A Link to the Past? Because these are meant to be, I think, the guys that are in basically every one of the dungeons, even as early as Eastern Palace. But you can just spam light arrows and they die pretty quick. And for killing that one, a chest spawns. I always did find this chest kind of funny because you get that little cutscene of the Igor dying, and it's all for, in this case at least, a stray fairy. And now it's time for me to do something I technically don't need to do yet, but I want to do now just for the sake of it. We have light arrows now, which means we can destroy sunblocks without the need of light. So I'm going to come back into portions of the dungeon we've already been to and speed up, particularly towards the water room where we need the Zora, and grab ourselves a stray fairy that we spawned in already over there. If you're playing along, I do recommend waiting to do this, because there's a couple other stray fairies we're gonna need to backtrack for anyway, so you might as well get them all in one shot. Like, I think even some guides consider this stray fairy like number 13 or 14, somewhere in that range. But yeah, I'm gonna get it now because why not? I'm partially waiting for a certain time of day anyway, so I might as well use some of it up. For now, though, it's time for us to Song of Soaring out of here because we've done all we can for now in the dungeon as it currently is. The Garo Master gave us a hint, so it's time to go use the light arrows just outside the dungeon. Now, this is where things get a little bit different depending on if you're playing N64 or 3DS. In the 3DS version, the red gem you need to shoot is on top of the entrance to the temple. Here in the N64 version, it's beneath the center block of the 3 here in front of the dungeon. Which means you need to play the LG of Emptiness again on at least one of the 3. And I always get which one it is first wrong. If only because I'm trying to actually solve it, like, you need to get across, whereas no, you just need to make the center move. You can hit the gem in question from either the left or right side of it. There it is. You may have noticed by now, I am very fast at playing the ocarina. By and large in this game, I only really play songs like this for LP's sake in normal speed, just to, like, set the mood. When I'm playing this game for myself, I'm just mashing the C buttons like nothing else, and sometimes that causes the songs to not register right, but my hand got way too fast at that over the years. And with that, the light arrows have now flipped the entire world upside down. Meaning anything that was now on the ceiling on the temple is now on the floor and we can access it normally. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 26, we're going to head back into Stone Tower Temple now that it's upside down and see just how that rearranges things. See you guys then.